first and wanna be a last. Wanna be a ranger, rise from the dust. I will be a shoulder, I will be a friend. I will be the one who love you till the end.
Cześć Wam, witam wszystkich serdecznie w 2015 roku. Mam nadzieję, że wszyscy zdrowo dotrwali, a ci, którzy jeszcze jakieś mniejsze lub większe problemy ze zdrowiem mają, to 2015 rok jest świetną okazją do tego, żeby wziąć się do kupy, zorganizować, ustalić sobie priorytety i zawalczyć o to, żeby doprowadzić swoje zdrowie do porządku. Ja przynajmniej ze swojej strony postaram się Wam parę rzeczy podrzucić, kilkoma rzeczami podzielić, żeby to wszystko było łatwiejsze i żeby tą właściwą drogę zdrowia dla siebie znaleźć. Dzisiaj już nie przeciągając, zapraszam Was w tym nowym roku na drugą część filmu, tłumaczenia filmu, w zasadzie wykładu doktora Schreibera, który jest autorem książki Antyrak. Jednej z ciekawszych, takich nie specjalnie naukowych, wystarczająco po ludzku napisanych książek, którą każdemu polecam, bo to nie tylko w kontekście choroby nowotworowej, bo w kontekście w ogóle zdrowego odżywiania uważam, że książka jest bardzo fajna. Tu macie jednocześnie miejsce, w którym możecie sobie kliknąć na pierwszą część z tego spotkania z doktorem Schreiberem, który gdzieś tam ktoś nagrywał, i tego tłumaczenia. No i zobaczyć, co było w pierwszej części wraz z moim komentarzem, a dzisiaj już nie przeciągając, zapraszam Was na drugą część, po której będzie krótki mój komentarz do tego, co zostanie powiedziane w filmie.
Second factor, fats. These are essential fatty acids. We call them essential because they're part of every cell membrane in the body. They're part of every biological process in the body, but the body cannot manufacture them. So the only place we can get them from is our food. Not in our food, not in the body. Now, interestingly, there are two families, the omega-3 family and the omega-6 family. They have very different properties. Once in the body, they get metabolized into very active biological substances. The omega-6 fatty acids get metabolized into pro-inflammatory prostaglandins, into substances that increase clotting, and into substances that stimulate cell growth. Remember that, stimulate cell growth. The omega-3 fatty acids do just the opposite. They reduce inflammation, they reduce clotting, and they reduce cell growth. When they're both in balance in your plate, they're in balance in your physiology, and everything's fine. However, this is what we started doing. 1940, we invented the use of soy oil for, and particularly hydrogenated, which is trans fat, soy oil for industrial products. And the consumption by human beings has skyrocketed. You see again a new phenomenon which has skyrocketed since World War II. Furthermore, we invented the new farm. I was raised in part on a farm in Normandy, and the color of the farm was not this one. What is the color that's missing from this? Green. That's right. Now, why is that important? Because grass is very rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Therefore, when cows eat grass, there are omega-3 fatty acids in milk, in butter, in cheese, in cream, and in meat. Same thing for hens, who used to eat grass and seeds and worms, very rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Now we feed these animals only with corn and soy, and the omega-3s disappear from the food chain, and the omega-6s shoot up, which are, corn and soy are full of omega-6s. Now, nobody told you about this, and we didn't think it would have consequences, but it does. Look at what it does to the food products. I was able to find data about the ratio of omega-6s and 3s in butter in 1960, which is a reasonably good ratio. Butter wasn't such a bad food in Normandy when I was growing up. Pork, beef, eggs, and this is in 2000. Butter has become a pro-inflammatory food. The worst offender are eggs. Eggs on my Normandy farm when I was a kid were a health food filled with omega-3 fatty acids essential for the development of the brain of children. And my grandmother kept me eating these eggs. Now these are eggs in 2000. 20 times more omega-6s than omega-3s. Eggs have become a pro-inflammatory food. And nobody told you that. So when you go to the supermarket, look for omega-3 eggs, and they're not eggs that have been injected with fish oil. They're normal eggs. These eggs should be marked as pro-inflammatory omega-6 eggs, and the normal eggs should just say normal eggs. They shouldn't say omega-3 eggs. This is what happened over millions of years. You see, as hominids developed, there was always a balance in their food between omega-6s and omega-3 fatty acids. And then something happened around 1945 when we started increasing omega-6s in the diet of animals and therefore in the diet of people, and reducing omega-3s. Now think about a lawnmower. Most of you have operated one at one point or another, or looked at somebody operate one. They need to be filled with just the right proportion of gasoline and oil. If you play around with the proportions and they're not right, the engine is going to sputter and may not function at all. This is what we're doing. We have a biology that is meant to function with this mix. This is the mix we're putting in. It created problems. The main problem is this one. Remember, omega-6s stimulate cell growth. Now, the only cells that can grow in an adult body are fat and cancer. We're seeing this, for sure. In fact, I'm going to show you something reasonably dramatic. This is the map of a country you love and care about, and I do too. And this is the map of obesity, you know, a BMI over 30. This is marked obesity. This is not just a little bit of overweight. In 1985, this is the year I arrived in Pittsburgh to do my PhD. And Pittsburgh's right here. People looked normal in Pittsburgh in 1985. This is the map in 1985. Some states had less than 10% obesity. Some had already between 10 and 14% obesity, darker blue. And then this is what we did to ourselves that I want you to take a look at. 1986, 1987, 1988, 1989, 1990, 1991, 1992. First states with 15 to 20%, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, states with more than 20% obesity, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, states with more than a quarter of the people obese, 2002, 2003, in 2004, 2005, the first states with more than a third of the people obese, 2006, 2007. Remember, obesity is one of the leading risk factors for cancer. Of course, people don't get cancer as soon as they become obese. It takes 10 to 20 years. So this may be the map and the progression of cancer rates in our country over the next 10 to 20 years, if we don't do something about that. Now, it's not just about fat, as I told you. This is a study in mice, looking at mice that have been grafted with breast cancer. And after a certain number of days, you can count the number of tumors on their breast, and they keep going up and up and up. If they're fed with corn oil on top of their regular diet, which is full of omega-6 fatty acids, this is what happens to the number of tumors. It is like adding fuel to the fire. If it were true just of mice, this would all be fine. Unfortunately, this also happens to women. This is a study that was done in Singapore. You cannot do these studies in the US because people have so much fatty acids, that omega-6s, that everybody's in this range here. But you have to go to countries where there's more range of consumption of omega-6 fatty acids. And you're looking at the number of cases of advanced breast cancer as a function of how much omega-6 fatty acids are present in the women's diet. And you see a dose-response curve with a 2.5 risk of increasing the chances of getting a breast cancer. To give you a sense of whether that's important or not, hormone replacement therapy is associated with a 1.4 increased risk of breast cancer, and it's a big deal. So think about a 2.5, okay? Chemical contamination started in 1940, exploded since then. How do we do this? Well, we're very good at spraying chemicals over our food. Now, it turns out that these compounds have powerful effects on biology. In fact, they're called endocrine disruptors because they mimic hormones, often estrogen-like hormones, so much so that when they end up in our rivers, they can change the sex of male frogs to female frogs. It turns out that exposed farm workers have much higher cancer risks, and the children of these farmers, even though they're not in the field, have higher risk of a variety of cancers simply from the residues of pesticides that their parents bring in the house on their clothing. Now, pesticide manufacturers tell us, yes, but we're not using the same pesticides as in the past. At least they don't accumulate in the body fat. People are able to eliminate them through their urine, so it's not as bad. Okay, fine. Let's look at a study of 42 children at the University of Seattle, ages 2 to 5, that either ate a conventional diet, and you can look at pesticide residues in their urine every day. So yes, they eliminate them, but they're exposed every day. Then they move to a 70% organic diet, and these go away. Then back on the conventional diet, and these explode again. So this is what's happening to our children. Household products. There are a variety. I can't go through all of this because we don't have enough time, but a lot of it is in the book. Household products are another way for us to be exposed to a variety of contaminants. One of the most common ones is dry cleaning. This suit was dry cleaned, and for years I practiced the worst possible way of dealing with this. I made sure, like many of you do, when I brought back my clothing from the dry cleaner, that I would keep it in the plastic bag and put it like this in my closet, so that when I would end up wearing my suit, I would have maintained the maximum concentration of carcinogenic tetrachloroethylene that I could then inhale and spread throughout my body. We know that people who work in those shops have much higher cancer rates than the rest of the population. People who live above dry cleaning shops have higher cancer rates than the rest of the population. When you bring back your dry cleaning, air it out for at least 2 hours before you put it in your closet or before you wear it. I'm not going to go over everything, but this is a striking one to remember. Phthalates in cosmetics and perfumes are associated with cancer. A few years ago, a magazine did a review of the different perfumes with the highest concentrations of phthalates, and one of the leading contenders was a perfume by Dior called Poison, so remember that. Don't heat liquids and foods in polycarbonated plastic that releases bisphenol A, which has now been found to prevent chemotherapy from killing cancer cells. There's a whole controversy about skin contact with aluminum. I just want to tell you about this. The science is not very good, but it's rather fun to go through, so I do that. A lot of women have been worrying for some time about the antiperspirants that contain aluminum. Does it increase breast cancer risk or not? In theory, it could, because what most women do is shave their armpits under the shower, and then they dry that. But they've created little nicks on the skin. And right after this, they apply the antiperspirant. And the aluminum can get through the nicks on the skin, be absorbed by the lymphatic system, get drained to the breast gland, and create inflammation there that can promote cancer growth. So is there an increased risk of breast cancer with aluminum antiperspirant? This is an interesting new case study. Not definitive science, but fun to go through, as I said. These are women who apply shave their armpits and apply antiperspirant. This is the average age at which they've recorded to develop breast cancer in the UK. These are women who shave but don't use antiperspirant. They get breast cancer later on average. These women use antiperspirant but don't shave. They also get breast cancer later. These women don't use antiperspirant, don't shave, don't have sex very often, but they end up having breast cancer later. A few words about sunlight. Sunlight as a vitamin. 20 minutes of exposure of your torso and arms and face without sunscreen in the sun of summertime will create 20,000 international units of vitamin D, which then gets stored in your body much more efficiently, in fact, than if you take it as a supplement. So sunlight is a vitamin. Why is that important? Well, this is the amount of vitamin D, the minimal amount of vitamin D you want to have in your blood. So get a blood test tomorrow morning if you get a chance, and you want to be above 30 nanograms per milliliter, definitely. Something happened to us between 1994 and 2004, just 10 years. Okay, this is the number of people in this country who had sufficient levels of vitamin D by age group. You see a marked drop in every age category. There's only 20% of people over 60 who have enough vitamin D in their system to protect them from cancer. Only 20%, barely more even in youngsters, right? So this argues for a 75 to 80% rate of deficiency in the United States. Why is that important? Well, look at this. This is the relationship between breast cancer death and level of sunshine. So here, Pittsburgh. I don't know where San Francisco is. I haven't looked for it. San Diego. A lot more sunshine in Honolulu and Phoenix. So wherever there's more sun, Tampa, Fort Worth, wherever there's more sun, Miami, lower rates of breast cancer. Wherever there's less, New York, Chicago, higher rates of breast cancer. And it's a very, very clean correlation. Now, I've given you all the bad news. Let's talk about some of the things we can do, having understood all this. The first thing is that for the last 40 years, all of oncology has been focused on destroying cancer cells, which is important. Again, it saved my life. However, there was an article in the New York Times, front page article about 6 months ago on the war on cancer started by Richard Nixon in 1971, almost 40 years ago, which showed that we spent between 150 and 200 billion dollars on cancer research in the last 40 years. And we've improved the median survival of metastatic cancer, which is really the only one that kills you, by 3 months. $200 billion. So maybe we're not pursuing quite the right roadmap. And what I'm saying, what a lot of other people like Michael, like Donald have been saying for some time, is that yes, it's great to kill cancer cells, but obviously it doesn't seem to be enough. It is important at the same time to strengthen the body's ability to resist cancer by creating an inhospitable terrain to cancer growth. And you can do both at the same time. This is not about alternative medicine. It's not about treating cancer with broccoli and meditation. It's about treating cancer with the best classical conventional medicine we have and broccoli and meditation. And let me show you why. First of all, these natural defenses are not pie in the sky. They're very real. This is human blood with cancer cells and white blood cells from the immune system. All of us have cancer cells. All of us have white blood cells that can identify and destroy them if we don't interfere with the ability of our natural defenses to do their job. See, here's another one that's going to get gobbled up, and here's another one. This is part of every one of us. We just need to learn how to help our defenses do their work. When we do, wonderful things happen. This is a study, again, reasonably recent, looked at 10,000 people. And it looked at basic health habits that support natural defenses and their impact not on quality of life, their impact on the hardest endpoint of all, survival, mortality and survival. Now, what you're looking at here is the curve for people who did none of the 4 health behaviors, 1, 2, 3, and all 4. And these are the survival curves over a period of 14 years. The 4 health behaviors to help not interfere with natural defenses were not smoking, not drinking more than 2 alcoholic beverages a day, eating 5 fruits or vegetables per day. It counted lousy fruits and vegetables that, like bananas don't really are anti-cancer, or potatoes, not really anti-cancer, but it counted them anyway. And 30 minutes of physical activity 5 times a week. Okay, so we're looking at people who had all 4 here and people who had none here. A 4-time difference in mortality risk over a 14-year period. Now, the interesting question is, that a lot of patients ask, doctor, if I do all these things you asked me to do, will I live longer or will it just seem like it's lasting a very long time? Oh, by the way, I should add one thing. In terms of mortality, the reduction in mortality was about the same for heart disease, which everybody would seem obvious, and cancer. Now, who had heard that you could act on cancer prevention about as much as you can on heart disease prevention? Now, this is prevention. Let's look at people who have cancer now. And this is a stunning study that was published in 2008 from Ohio State University, which did not make it in the New York Times, which infuriates me. 222 women had all gone through breast cancer and the best breast cancer treatment in National Cancer Institute approved centers around the country. Then they were divided into two groups. One group only had treatment as usual, which means we didn't ask them to change anything to their way of life, and we only looked at whether the cancer would return early or not. And this is their survival curve over the next 11 years. And this group, women were randomized to this group, so they were exactly equivalent at the beginning. After treatment, they participated in a 1-year program, meeting once a week for 4 months, then once a month for the remaining 8 months, where they learned how to eat slightly differently, include more physical activity in their lives, reach in themselves to manage stress by learning a basic breathing yoga technique, like Michael was teaching folks who had cancer in the 1970s and being considered a lunatic for doing that. And fourth, they learned how to reach out to friends in their lives for support during difficult times, which not all of us know how to do, especially if we're American. So these women, after 11 years, had a 68% reduction in mortality. 68% reduction in mortality. We do not know of a single conventional treatment that compares with that result. And it didn't make it to the New York Times. So ask me during the question period why. This I want to show you because it explains so much about the resistance of a lot of conventional oncologists to these approaches, and maybe the most important slide of the whole talk. So concentrate with me for 1 second. All of these women had breast cancer as well, all had treatment. Following treatment, some of them didn't do anything special, and this is their survival curve here, the gray line, okay? Then these women, the yellow-green line, made an effort to eat 5 fruits and vegetables per day. Again, there was not very discriminative that included fruits and vegetables that are known to not particularly help with cancer, but there were at least 5 of them per day. Now what you see is a little bit perhaps of a benefit in the early years, but the bottom line, no difference. Now I want to show you this because this is what most oncologists believe. You ask them, should I eat differently? Well, do whatever you want, it won't make much of a difference, is the usual answer, right? This is because they know these kinds of studies. There have been many of these. Now, the red line are women who include physical activity in their lives 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Interesting, they get more of a benefit, right? Last longer in terms of survival, but in the end, no difference. Again, your oncologist will tell you, yeah, exercise is good for you, you won't die of a heart attack. But in terms of cancer, no difference. Now, I wouldn't be showing you this slide if there wasn't a different twist to it, which is the blue line. The blue line happens to be the women who both eat 5 fruits and vegetables per day and include 30 minutes of physical activity 5 times a week. And something magical happens. They lift their survival chances dramatically. Now, I want to emphasize this because, in conventional medicine, it seems like they would want us in integrative medicine to be able to prove that broccoli in and of itself, and if possible just one molecule in broccoli, like sulforaphane or indole-3-carbinol, can slow down cancer. Whereas they, on the other hand, when they treat cancer, any cancer, always use at least 3 drugs, right? They always use the synergy of medications. We do that for AIDS with tritherapy. We do that for tuberculosis with 3 antibiotics. But we in integrative medicine, we wouldn't be able to rely on the synergy of the things we do. Doesn't make any sense. Obviously, if you're going to use broccoli and exercise, you better combine them. And you're much more likely to find an effect on a course of cancer when you do multiple interventions. And the insight of the early pioneers in this field, like Michael, like Donald, has always been that. Telling their patients, do as much as you can to change your lifestyle. It's not just about adding pomegranate juice or drinking green tea. These are great things to do, but just one thing isn't going to make a difference, right? You're going to have to combine them, change your lifestyle. So this is a very important slide. Foods. The good news is that foods are made of molecules, of course, and some of these molecules have been absolutely identified and characterized as potent anti-cancer agents. This is a paper in Nature in 2003. This is the curcumin of turmeric, the famous Indian yellow spice that is such a powerful anti-cancer agent. The gingerol of ginger, the EGCG of green tea, the sulforaphane of broccoli, the indole-3-carbinol of the whole cabbage family. The lycopene of tomato sauce, the genistein of soy, and so on. These molecules have potent anti-cancer effects. And at the University of Montreal, a cancer researcher who'd been working for 20 years trying to identify new cancer drugs by putting a drop of the drug in a colony of cancer cell and looking at its capacity to slow down, inhibit cancer growth, once read an article in Nature about green tea and decided that in his $40 million lab equipment, he was going to add a $50 juicer. And he started juicing garlic and broccoli and cabbage and putting a little drop of that juice in the cancer cell colonies, just like he'd done with the chemicals for 20 years. And lo and behold, what he found is that drops of some of these vegetables, not all of them, but some of them, were capable of inhibiting cancer growth by 100%. This is for a colon cancer cell line. The beauty of this, though, is that when you identify a drug that inhibits cancer growth by 100%, 99% of the time it is so toxic that it can never become a useful medication. When you do this with cabbage, this is something that the human race has been eating for perhaps 100,000 years. You know that it is completely safe. Furthermore, it would have been bad news if, to be effective, you had to eat cabbage and only cabbage 3 days a week for the rest of your life. It could have been also that once you start mixing cabbage with beetroots or garlic or whatever, they inhibited each other's benefits on cancer cells. It turns out to be exactly the opposite. Once again, we see the law of synergy. Now, this is the typical anti-cancer plate. Again, I'm not going to go into all the detail, but just a few points. First of all, it doesn't look like the American national dish. Okay, the hamburger and French fries is probably the worst possible thing you could do to your body because red meat has been associated with increasing cancer rates everywhere it's been studied, especially when it's grilled. And barbecued grilled is probably the worst thing you can do because it brings up all these carcinogen nitrosamines onto the meat. Then we take that meat, and which is omega-6, full of omega-6 fatty acids because the beef hasn't eaten any grass. Okay, we take that meat and we combine it with one of the only vegetables that has no anti-cancer properties, which is potatoes, which raises blood sugar in addition when you eat it. Then we take that potato, we dip it into omega-6 oil. To make sure we get a bit more of these omega-6s to increase inflammation. Then we fry the oil so that it will suck up all of our antioxidant defenses when we eat them. Not enough, because this would be just like the French national dish, steak and French fries. We Americans like to improve on things, so we add ketchup, which is full of high fructose corn syrup, to increase insulin response and more inflammation. And we put a white bun, and the white flour is just like eating sugar, and it raises blood sugar as well. And we make that our national dish. If you want to invent a national dish for a foreign country you don't like, you can export this, which is in fact what we do. And, and we've seen rates of cancer and obesity and diabetes go up practically everywhere around the world as they begin to import this way of eating. Now, the anti-cancer plate is the opposite. It is, this is the key concept. If you remember just one thing about how to eat differently, instead of having 80% animal protein, meat usually, and a few vegetables fighting it out in your plate, eat like our ancestors used to eat, even 50 years ago. Eat 80% vegetables, and you can have a little meat. It doesn't matter. Use meat as a taste-enhancing condiment, not as the core of what you're eating. If you really like animal protein, eat fish, full of omega-3 fatty acids. Okay? That's the core concept. In terms of fats, Go back to your kitchen cabinet tonight, look for all these oils that are there, get rid of corn oil, of sunflower oil, of soybean oil. Do not give it to your neighbor or your relatives. There's nothing else you can do with it than put it in the garbage. Replace that by olive oil and canola oil and do all of your cooking with that, all of your salad dressing with that. These have potent anti-cancer agents in them. You can use butter if it is 1960 butter. Well, that exists. It's called omega-3 butter nowadays, but it's just 1960 butter. Okay, comes from animals who have eaten grass or linseeds to balance their fatty acids. Same with eggs. Eggs are a good source of food and protein as long as they're omega-3 eggs, which means normal eggs. Include a lot of beans, lentils, chickpeas in your diet because this will provide all the protein you need if you cut down on animal products. Add garlic and onion to almost all of your dishes. Because they have potent anti-cancer agents and they enhance flavor. Don't do it with desserts. Doesn't work as well. And finally, put as many Mediterranean herbs in your diet as you can. Basil, rosemary, oregano, thyme, mint. All of these have potent anti-cancer agents in them and they enhance the flavor of food. This is not a boring diet. This is a diet you can stay on forever. Our ancestors did, people around the Mediterranean did, and this is where our best culinary traditions come from. You know, whether it be Morocco or Greece or Tunisia, south of France, Italy. This is an Italian diet of 1950. I guarantee you they love their food and they didn't miss the hamburgers. Now, the only really bad news about this is you don't see much dessert on that because it brings up blood sugar. So dessert is mostly fruit. Some fruits have specific anti-cancer activity, such as raspberry, strawberries, blueberries. But even now we know plums, apricots, the large stone fruits, have anti-cancer activity as well. And maybe one last thing I want to say, yeah, chocolate. It's not on the plate, but chocolate is helpful because if you eat dark chocolate, at least 70% cocoa, it doesn't have as much sugar in it, and chocolate itself has anti-cancer properties. It has polyphenols like in green tea. And it's very satiating, and it gives you a nice feeling of having had dessert without really having had dessert. So I recommend chocolate. You can have 1 or 2 glasses of red wine per day, which contains resveratrol, also has anti-cancer activity, as long as it is eaten in the context of a Mediterranean diet. If you have red wine with hamburger and French fries, it's a disaster. If you provide your body with the right antioxidants and plant-based chemicals to surround it, it becomes an anti-cancer food. A few words about vitamin D, just to show you that this is incredible because we don't have this for very many natural interventions. This is a double-blind study, controlled, double-blind, randomized study of giving people vitamin D or a placebo and looking at cancer rates. And what you're seeing is that the folks who have vitamin D as opposed to placebo, don't look at the calcium thing is irrelevant, have a 75% reduction in the probability of developing any kind of cancer. It's not just one kind, it's any kind. 75%. If you stop smoking, you reduce your chances of getting cancer by 30%. So you should still stop smoking. But this is even more important than tobacco. And it's amazing that every single patient in cancer centers haven't had a vitamin D level drawn on them, and a recommendation for getting their vitamin D to an adequate amount, which is, I remind you, if you have cancer, it probably should be closer to 60 ng per ml, but at very least above 30. 70% of cancer patients in this country are deficient in vitamin D.
No to mam nadzieję, że film Wam się podobał, a ja ze swojej strony tylko parę słów komentarzy do tego dorzucę. Moi drodzy, przede wszystkim to mam wrażenie, że część z osób, która gdzieś tam widziała parę filmów z mojego bloga, wie, że to, co zostało dzisiaj powiedziane w filmie, to ja to męczę już od długiego czasu. Męczę to, że powinniśmy sobie radzić bardzo mocno z zanieczyszczeniami, tak? No cały blok jest temu poświęcony, chociaż jeszcze nie doszedłem do ziół, chociażby, o których chciałbym parę słów powiedzieć, kiedy przyjdzie na to pora i mówić o tym, jak można wykorzystywać zioła, bo na razie czyścimy wątrobę, głodówka jest formą czyszczenia organizmu i naprawiania organizmu, przynajmniej według tego, co ja Wam mówię, ale mówię, no lekarzem nie jestem, więc muszę się pilnować w słowach, natomiast ja z tego sam osobiście korzystam i te wszystkie rzeczy już wiecie, no właśnie otyłości, zanieczyszczenia, to wszystko jest tak powszechne dla większości ludzi, że aż bagatelizowane, bo gdyby dzisiaj ktoś stwierdził, że czynnik XYZ jest sprawcą wszelkich nowotworów, to wszyscy chcieliby go zredukować, ale te wszystkie czynniki w stylu braki witamin, minerałów, nieodpowiednie odżywianie, źle zbilansowana dieta, to wszystko to już jest tak stare, że się wydaje aż niemożliwe, żeby trzeba było do tego taką wagę przywiązywać. W końcu żyjemy w świecie high-tech. Teraz laboratoria troszczą się o nasze zdrowie. Teraz suplementy, większość witamin może być syntetycznych, a to nie tak. To nie tak, bo te laboratoria tak naprawdę próbują naśladować matkę naturę, która tworzyła to miliardami lat i w sposób zdecydowanie lepszy niż jeszcze długo naprawdę musi wody w Wiśle upłynąć, Wisła przestanie istnieć, zanim te pewne schematy i pewne umiejętności syntetyzowania pewnych związków chemicznie człowiek posiądzie dla siebie i będzie z nich korzystał. Tak czy inaczej, matka natura jest niepowtarzalna, jest jedyna i jest najbardziej perfekcyjna jak na razie w swoim działaniu i w tym, co produkuje dla nas i korzystajmy z tego, zostawmy świat technologii i troszeczkę bardziej na boku. Moi drodzy, to, co zostało w dzisiejszym filmie powiedziane, jest bardzo ważne. Ja nie będę mówił, jeszcze raz wracał właśnie do zanieczyszczeń, o których mówiłem w innym materiale i tak dalej. Natomiast jest dla mnie bardzo ważne, żebyście tego nie zbagatelizowali, w związku z czym, jeżeli ktoś myśli, że nie wiem, to nie ma potwierdzenia nigdzie, to niech, nie wiem, otwórzcie sobie chociażby Wikipedię i zobaczcie, czy to są faktycznie istotne sprawy. A jeżeli ktoś twierdzi, że no nie wiem, Wikipedia też nie do końca, bo to takie średnie źródło, dobrze, to niech sobie kupi fizjologię człowieka, autorstwa Konturka, niech sobie kupi o odżywianiu jakieś książki pani Rudnickiej czy pani Ciborowskiej i też można tam wszędzie pewne rzeczy wyczytać, chociażby to, jak ważna dla naszego organizmu jest równowaga w kwasach omega-3 i omega-6, która została tutaj poruszona. No i niestety większość produktów, tak naprawdę niektórzy producenci oleju, i zobaczcie to, chwalą się, że mają tak dużo omega-3. Nie ma tu ani słowa w kwestii balansu do omega-6, a to jest najistotniejsze. Dlaczego? No, bo po prostu ta równowaga musi zostać zachowana. A zobaczcie teraz na najprostszą źródło informacji, czyli Wikipedię, jaki jest stosunek, widzicie właśnie jaki jest stosunek kwasów omega-3 do kwasów omega-6 w różnych produktach. I rozumiem, no każdy wie, że łosoś jest dobrą rybą. Taki dobry łosoś, bo łosoś łososiowi ostatnimi czasy też nierówny. Ale no spójrzcie niżej na tą tabelę. Zobaczcie olej słonecznikowy, który jest praktycznie na stałe w naszych kuchniach i zobaczcie, jak to wygląda. No przecież to jest dramat. Już 100 razy lepiej zamienić olej słonecznikowy na olej rzepakowy. On też nie jest idealny, no ale tłuszcze są nam niezbędne, to nie ulega najmniejszej wątpliwości. Zresztą dieta ketogeniczna oparta jest o tłuszcze i tam też jest to bardzo ważne. Do tego o diecie ketogenicznej zdążymy sobie jeszcze powiedzieć, bo ja cały czas idę w tym kierunku. Natomiast w kwestii oczyszczania organizmu dalej nie mówiliśmy o ziołach, tak jak Wam powiedziałem. No wiele rzeczy zostało jeszcze pominiętych, do których będę wracał. Jak tylko nagram ten materiał związany z chorobami nowotworowymi, jak go zakończę, to już nie wiem, chyba 7. film z tego rzędu. To co ważne, ja sobie, moi drodzy, kwasy omega-3 to ja sobie kupiłem, ja sobie jem. Jem sobie w dawce 1000 mg, jest to wystarczająca dawka dziennie, po to, żeby ten balans wrzucić. No i teraz, jeżeli byśmy byli wegetarianami, pozbawili się wszelkiego rodzaju źródeł kolagenu, witaminy B12, dobrych źródeł kwasów omega-3, no to to będzie do przeżycia, to może być nawet zdrowe. Jest wiele powodów bardzo ważnych, dla których dieta wegańska jest znacznie, czy wegetariańska jest znacznie lepsza od takiego standardowego jedzenia. To nie ma w ogóle dwóch zdań na ten temat. Natomiast no, są pewne mniejsze lub większe braki, więc ja staram się pewne rzeczy sobie tutaj gdzieś rekompensować, chociaż wegetarianinem nie jestem. Inna sprawa, to co zostało powiedziane w tym materiale. Kochani, witamina D3. To jest chyba jeden z bardziej niedocenianych tematów, jaki mogę sobie wyobrazić. Szczególnie, że nie wiem, czy wiecie, w naszej szerokości geograficznej my w okresie od październik, listopad, grudzień, styczeń, luty, marzec jesteśmy na deficycie. Witamina D3 może być nasz organizm, tak do końca to nawet nie jest witamina, bo z założenia witamina jest czymś, czego organizm nie potrafi sam sobie wytworzyć, a witamina D3 potrafi wytworzyć przy założeniu, że ma odpowiednią długość fal słonecznych, tak, dociera do skóry, do tłuszczu i tam ta synteza, ten proces syntezy zostaje włączony i zachodzi. I wtedy nie ma żadnych problemów z niedoborem. Natomiast to musi być odpowiedniej długości ta fala i ta fala niestety w naszej szerokości geograficznej przez te 6 miesięcy nie występuje. Więc my jesteśmy narażeni na deficyt, a o tym, na ile to jest ważna witamina, no to już wiemy z filmu, który przed chwilą się skończył. Takich rzeczy jest bardzo dużo. I teraz no co robić, tak? Przez pół roku no, można iść w tabletki, nie ma sprawy. To też jest jakieś rozwiązanie, bo ja nie twierdzę, że wszędzie jakby sztuką, według mnie sztuką całego zdrowego odżywiania jest, no, trzeba uwzględnić w tym wszystkim też aspekt tego, w jakim rejonie się żyje, tak? Coraz częściej się o tym mówi, że niektóre owoce wcale nie muszą być dla nas takie fantastyczne, jeśli są gdzieś daleko wschodniego pochodzenia i nasz organizm nie jest do końca do tego przystosowany. Mniej lub bardziej ważne, ale generalnie ten aspekt takiego dopasowania jest dosyć szeroki. Ja kiedy przygotowuję, czy próbuję przygotować dietę, no to w zasadzie biorę pod uwagę z 40 przynajmniej, nie wiem, minerałów z witaminami, żeby to zostało zbalansowane odpowiednio, żeby te proporcje kaloryczne były odpowiednie, ale nie tylko w makroskładnikach, bo jest mnóstwo rzeczy, które nie są w ogóle jakby nie przywiązuje się do tego wagi. Zresztą Wam pokażę może w którymś materiale. Wszystkich zapraszam też do zaglądania na blog drogazdrowia.com, dlatego że nie wszystkie materiały są w formie wideo publikowane. Tak czy inaczej, no, tych rzeczy związanych z witaminą D3 też jest bardzo dużo. No i innym rozwiązaniem zamiast suplementacji tabletkami jest na przykład właśnie zakupienie sobie lampy UVB. Jeżeli, nie wiem, ktoś tam się kąpie i może sobie w łazience taką lampę powiesić, to wystarczy, że tam te kilkanaście minut, jeżeli będzie, no najlepiej, żeby ta ekspozycja świetna była na dużą powierzchnię ciała i żeby te promienie gdzieś tam, no wiadomo, że nie przez filtry, nie przez żadnego rodzaju ubranie, tylko zwyczajnie, no dlatego myślę, że łazienka jest taką rozsądną opcją. Jest mnóstwo rzeczy, które możemy, małych rzeczy robić dla siebie, a one, tak jak to się mówi, ziarnko do ziarnka zbierze się miarka i one wszystkie spowodują, że nasz stan zdrowia się poprawi. Nie, od samego początku mówię, nienawidzę podejścia w stylu to na pewno to plus to, czyli nie wiem, witamina taka i może jeszcze jakiś jeden pierwiastek, to leczy. Jesteśmy za głupi, żeby tak, z takim przekonaniem o tym mówić. Natomiast nie ulega żadnej wątpliwości, że jak największa ilość, i o tym też była mowa w wykładzie, jak największa ilość pozytywnych rzeczy, których możemy dla siebie zrobić, forma odżywiania, aktywności fizycznej, umiejętności relaksacji i tego komfortu psychicznego, tego się zbiera bardzo dużo. Im więcej takich aspektów tego życia potrafimy wykorzystywać, tym lepiej będziemy funkcjonować. I to jest jakby core całego podejścia. Nie szukajcie tylko jednego czy dwóch pierwiastków. Może Wam brakować 20 pierwiastków i 5 witamin. A stawiając tylko na jedną z tych rzeczy i nie zmieniając radykalnie, nie wiem, podejścia do zdrowia i do właśnie odżywiania, no będziecie moim zdaniem krążyć po omacku i nigdzie nie traficie. Kochani, jeszcze jedna rzecz. Pokażę Wam, co będę robił, zanim zakończę. Kupiłem sobie sprzęt, to jest glukometr, którym mierzy też poziom ciał ketonowych. Bardzo fajny, prosty sprzęcik. Ponieważ będę chciał nagrać dla Was materiał o diecie ketogenicznej, o której wiele razy już mówiłem i wtedy pokażę Wam kilkanaście źródeł zapewne, prac naukowych, bo też prosicie mnie o źródła, więc pokażę Wam kilkanaście źródeł, na których się opieram i swoje pewne stwierdzenia i to są prace praktycznie wszystkie wydane po 2005 pewnie roku, także to wszystko nowe rzeczy. I mam do tego glukometru dwa rodzaje pasków. Paski do pomiaru cukru i pasku do pomiaru właśnie ciał ketonowych. I chodzi o to, że generalnie jeżeli spada cukier, to automatycznie te ciała ketonowe się podnoszą. To jest i dla cukrzyków ważne, oczywiście mówię bardziej o cukrzykach typu drugiego, tak, o cukrzycy typu drugiego, ale po to, żeby tą dietę zbilansować, żeby nie być pozornie na diecie ketogenicznej, żeby z drugiej strony nie było zagrożenia kwasicą, to Wam w odpowiednim czasie wytłumaczę, gdzie tkwi taki paradoks, albo raczej dlaczego niektórzy ludzie mają za mało trochę wiedzy, żeby automatycznie odrzucać możliwość przejścia na dietę ketogeniczną, bo nagle kwasica, guzik, nie kwasica. Także to będę robił. Będę chciał Wam pokazać w sposób praktyczny, jak pewne pokarmy i bilansowanie mojej diety wpływa na to, co będzie wychodzić w wynikach. A przyłożymy sobie to wszystko do tabelki w odpowiednim czasie i będziemy wtedy wiedzieć, czy te wyniki są poprawne, czy jestem na tej diecie i będziemy mogli sobie zmierzyć parę parametrów. To takie fajne kolejne zadanie, ale przede mną jeszcze inne rzeczy, na przykład głodówka sucha, której się trochę boję, ale trzeba to zrobić, bo sobie obiecałem. A później też bym chciał jeszcze oczywiście już do Was troszeczkę bardziej o ziołach mówić. Zobaczymy. Na razie cieszę się, że udało mi się zakończyć ten materiał związany z tym wykładem. No i mam nadzieję, że niedługo uda mi się nagrać kolejny materiał. Na razie, pozdrawiam, cześć.
I've been hurt enough